This episode was pre-recorded as part of a live continuing education webinar. On-demand CEUs are still available for this presentation through all CEUs. Register at allceus.com/counselor toolbox. And I'd like to welcome everybody today to Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, Addressing Negative Thoughts. Now, a lot of us took courses in cognitive behavioral therapy. We've worked with CBT for many, many years. So some of this is just going to be a refresher. And others, you may pick up a few new tips or tools as we go along. So we're going to define cognitive behavioral therapy and its basic principles. Just get a really basic refresher on what was that original CBT about. We'll identify factors impacting people's choice of behaviors because, they always have a choice. We'll explore causes and the impact of thinking errors, whether you call them cognitive distortions, irrational thoughts, or when I work with my clients, I try to call them unhelpful beliefs or unhelpful thoughts because distortions and irrational seem sort of pejorative to me. So I try to avoid those words as much as possible and help clients see them as not incorrect necessarily, but unhelpful. And then we'll identify some common thinking errors and their relationship to cognitive distortions and some of our just very basic fears. Why do we care? Well, because cognitive distortions or irrational thoughts or unhelpful thoughts, whatever you want to say, really impacts people on a physical level, a mental level, and an emotional level. A person who perceives the world as hostile, unsafe, and unpredictable will tend to be more hypervigilant until they exhaust the stress response system. So think about, a battleship. And you've got a bunch of new people on this battleship, and all the sailors, every time there's the least little thing, they send off the all hands on deck. So a big bird flies over, and I mean literally a bird, and they freak out, sound the all hands on deck. And this goes on for a week or 2 or 6 months. Let's think about our clients. They don't usually come in right away, where everything sets off that startle response. Everything sets off that fight or flight response. The staff starts to get exhausted. All the rest of the sailors that have to drop everything and run to their battle stations, after a little while, they're like, really? No, we can't even do this. And it also reminds me of The Boy Who Cried Wolf. Anyhow, I digress. Sticking with the battleship metaphor. So eventually the captain says, you know what? Let's retrain on what is worth setting off the all hands on deck because everybody here is exhausted and nobody's even really responding anymore. When they come to their battle stations, they're just kind of dragging their butts in like, whatever, it's probably another false alarm. The same sort of thing is true with us. When we're on high alert for too long, our brain says, you know what? We got to conserve some energy in case some really, really big threat comes along. So it turns down what I call the stress response system. It turns down the sensitivity. So you don't get alerted for every little thing that would cause you stress. But you also don't get alerted for those little things that would cause you happiness either. Anything that would cause the excitatory neurotransmitters to be secreted, you're just not getting those anymore, which a lot of people kind of refer to as depression. It's just kind of like, yeah, whatever. And only the biggest, most notable things actually cause an emotional effect. We don't want people to get to that point. That's no way to live. So we need to help them learn how to sort of retrain their spotters to figure out what is actually stressful. A person who perceives the world as generally good and believe they have the ability to deal with challenges as they arise will be able to allow their stress response system to function normally. There are going to be times you have all hands on deck, whether it's a real emergency or whether it's just a drill, but it will happen and they can go, they can, do what they're going to do. They have that adrenaline rush. They have the energy and the focus to do their jobs. And when it's over, they can go back to their quarters. They can relax, refresh, just kind of chill for a while. And then there's a lull where their body rebalances before the next one. And this is kind of what we want in life. I mean, ideally, we wouldn't have super high peaks very often, But we want to make sure we give our body time to rebalance after there's a stressor and not have to stand on edge, not be hypervigilant constantly, just waiting for the next one to come along. So what is the impact of these thinking errors? Well, whenever we have that stress response system activated, the body is saying we either need to fight or we need to flee. So you're just dumping all kinds of adrenaline and other neurochemicals. So there's anxiety. There can be stress. When people start having this reaction, they start having muscle tension, sweating, heart rate increases, breathing increases. People will call that anxiety. Some will label that as anger. Either way, they're both sides of the same coin. They need to do something. But if it lasts too long, then we start moving into depression. And they don't have the get up and go anymore. There's just not any excitatory neurotransmitters really left. They need some time to rest and rebalance. Behaviorally, think about it. If you go somewhere and you are just constantly on guard, are you going to keep going there or are you going to withdraw? So people who have a lot of thinking errors, unhelpful thoughts, tend to withdraw more. They may turn to addictions to kind of numb or blunt some of the input. Sleep problems and changes. When you are hypervigilant, when you have this stress response going, even if it's not at full bore, if it's still there somewhat, if you're stressed out, you're not going to sleep as well. You're going to maintain higher levels of cortisol. So you're not going to get that restful, rejuvenating sleep. You may kind of doze on and off. Eating changes. Depending on the person, some people eat to self-soothe, some people can't eat at all. But we do see that the hormones, ghrelin and leptin, get all out of whack, not under stress, but also when sleep gets out of whack, when your circadian rhythms get out of whack. So we're starting to see the cascade effect where it's emotional and behavioral. Physical, you've got stress-related illnesses that start coming up. If you're on that much, you've got muscle tension for that long, it starts to hurt. You start to get migraines, your back starts to hurt. Wherever you store your stress, so to speak, it starts to come out. And most people, when they're under a lot of stress for an extended period, a day is not a big deal for most people, but for an extended period, become more susceptible to illnesses. They start getting sick easier. Headaches, GI distress. Some people store their stress right in their gut. Socially, think about the last time you were stressed. Were you patient and tolerant and just a pleasure to be around? You may have tried to be, but you're more prone to irritability and impatience, and again, wanting to withdraw. All of these effects contribute to fatigue and a sense of hopelessness and helplessness, which often intensifies thinking errors. So you'll see this negative reciprocal interaction. If somebody feels stressed out and overwhelmed and they withdraw, then they may start feeling like they have no support, and they lose all their social buffers to the stress, so they feel even more stressed, so they want to withdraw even more. So we're going to talk about how to prevent that. Now, I like this little diagram, maybe because it's got a heart in the center, I don't know. But behavior, feelings, and thoughts. This is the outside of the circle. All three of these impact each other. When you do something, it often impacts your feelings and your thoughts about a situation. If you think positively, you're probably going to choose more positive behaviors and have more positive feelings. If you're thinking negatively, obviously, you may choose more of an escape behavior or a protection behavior, and may have more feelings of anger, anxiety, depression, etc. So these things are going on, and they're all interacting. The one really cool thing is if you break this chain somewhere or this circuit, then you can stop that reciprocal negative downward spiral. So cognitive behavioral helps people who are willing to show up, or who are willing to address their thoughts. Not everybody is willing to start addressing their thoughts right away. Maybe they want to start addressing their sleep problems and their eating problems, or something that's more physical. Okay, that's fine, because anywhere we interrupt this circuit is going to have positive effects assuming the intervention is positive, is going to have positive effects on the other ones. So what about the triangle? Well, yourself. So your feelings, thoughts, and behavior impact you. It impacts how you feel. And you're like, well, yeah, okay, just stay with me. But the way you feel, think, and act impacts your future, and it also impacts how you interact with others. So, that kind of affects things, because remember, social support is a big buffer for us. Now, core beliefs, and you can do this inward to outward or outward to inward, but either way, it comes down to core beliefs. If you have positive thoughts and positive feelings, and you generally engage in positive behaviors to keep that cycle going, you will probably feel pretty good about yourself, have good relationships, have a somewhat optimistic feeling about the future, and your core beliefs may be more like, people are generally good. I can do this. Very self-affirming and other-affirming, positive core beliefs about yourself and the world. Now, if your thoughts or feelings are negative, then you have this negative outer circle. You don't feel so good. You start questioning the goodness and trustability and dependability of other people. You have more of a bleak look in the future. So what do you think is going to happen to the core beliefs? The core beliefs may change to, if someone doesn't love me, I am completely unlovable. They may change to being more extreme, more negative, and more difficult to rectify if you want to have somebody who's happy. I mean, you're not going to have somebody who's happy who thinks the world is an unkind, unpredictable, scary place going, it's just wonderful roses today. So we have to help people try to eventually start adjusting those core beliefs. And when we get into cognitive behavioral, remember the ABCs? Your automatic thought, then your and beliefs are what happen as soon as that event occurs. And those you don't think about. That's why they're called automatic. So when you have the ABCs, these core beliefs are those things that pop up that we need to address. So what factors affect this? And there's a lot of stuff right here. In DBT, they call them vulnerabilities. We're just going to talk about, in general, different factors that affect the choices our clients make in terms of behaviors. So negative emotions, if they're feeling angry, if they're feeling anxious, if they're feeling depressed, they're probably not going to be really motivated to get up and engage in a whole lot of self-affirming activities. They're probably not going to be having a lot of positive self-affirming thoughts. They're going to be focused on whatever is causing that distress and maybe escaping from that. Physically, pain and illness. When you don't feel well, it's harder to be Susie Sunshine. And I don't think many of us are just a barrel of monkeys when we don't feel well. So if our clients have pain, this is one of those, if you want to put it in behavioral areas, physical areas we can address, and have them go see their physician, have them go see their physical therapist, and get recommendations so they aren't feeling physically painful, physically in distress all the time. Because physical distress and emotional distress both mess with sleep. Unfortunately, sleep is the first thing to usually go. And I'm not talking about quantity. I know a lot of clients who, when they get depressed, they're in bed for, days. They'll get up, they'll maybe shower, and, go back to bed. And they're sleeping a lot. But it doesn't mean it's quality sleep. So what we need to look at is, what is the quality of their sleep? Are they getting that rejuvenation, the time for their brain and neurochemicals to rebalance so they can feel happy, so they can have that nice balance of all the neurotransmitters they need to feel happy. Poor nutrition. Well, no matter how much sleep they get, if they don't have the building blocks to make the neurotransmitters and the hormones that are needed to prompt the feelings, the physiological sensations that we've labeled happiness,